the Chop Chop Lady. On 29th May 1967, a woman's legs were found chopped into 4 pieces and wrapped in a newspaper in a garbage can in Malabon Street, Santa Cruz, Manila. The garbage collector who found the parts said that they were cold to touch, as if they had been kept in the freezer. He also noted that the toes were well pedicured, like they belonged to someone well-to-do. Then, a day later, her torso was found on a vacant lot along the Epifanio de los Santos Avenue near the Guadalupe Bridge. The woman's head was never found, and an autopsy revealed that she was 1 month pregnant at the time of her death. It took time for the police to identify the body, but the police managed somehow to get the fingerprints, which subsequently found to match one person found in the police clearance files, Lucila Lalu. The woman, Lucila Lalu, 28 years old, came to Manila from Candaba, Pampanga to seek fortune in 1961. She initially worked as a waitress at a small bar, and apparently she was really good with money. Her hard-earned money, which she saved quite wisely, was enough to start several ventures, like Lucy's House of Beauty, a saloon in Meha Lake Street, and Pagoda, which was a restaurant and cocktail lounge located along Rizal Avenue in Santa Cruz, Manila. During this time, Lucila also met Añano de Vera, a police officer who was married, but who, nevertheless, fell in love with her. Soon, the two began living together in a common law marriage and had a child together. However, she also had a lover, Florente Relos, a 19-year-old waiter at the Pagoda Soda Fountain. On May 28, 1967, Lucila went to work and never returned. Where she was held for 2 days while she was missing was never discovered. Following her murder, Florente Relos was arrested and questioned. However, Relos had an airtight alibi, and he appeared to have the least reasons for killing her, as Lucila was both his lover as well as his provider. Lucila had even rented him a room for him to stay. However, the cashier at Pagoda said that Lucila wanted to end her relationship with Relos, but Relos swears Lucila was very much in love with him. 2 of his friends even corroborated his claim that he was with his friends at the time of the murder, which was between late Sunday evening and Monday noon. Suspicion started to shift to the victim's common-law husband, Patrolman Vera. Relos testified that Vera had mauled him once in the Pagoda Soda Fountain when Vera saw Lucila and Relos holding hands, but the police could not find any direct evidence connecting the patrolman to the crime. Homicide investigators noted that whoever killed Lucila was someone skilled with the knife or have some sort of medical knowledge, since the parts were expertly cut. In initial reports, they also mentioned that since the body parts were frozen and scattered in different parts of the city, they were looking for someone with an access to a huge freezer and an automobile. Lucila's neighbors claimed that they saw 3 men dragging what looked like a body from Lucila's residence during the night of the murder. However, this claim was never verified. On June 15, 1967, Jose Luis Santiano, a 28-year-old dental student, surfaced and confessed to the crime. Jose Luis was one of the boarders of the spare rooms in Lucila's parlor and claimed that on that night, Lucila had tried to seduce him, and that when he refused, she threatened to create a scandal. This was when Jose lost his mind and killed her. Then he disposed of her body in Diliman, Quezon City, and carried her body parts in paper bags and boxes while commuting in taxis. Police later found traces of dried blood underneath Jose's bed, where he said he had kept the body before disposing of it. Inside his room, police also found kitchen knife, razor blade, and a woman's stockings. However, a few days later, he retracted and repudiated his confession and insisted on his innocence. The supposed pieces of evidence that police found was also unconvincing, and the NBI ended up taking over the case. Later on, Jose was found not guilty of the charges against him. In a plot twist, a former Los Angeles cop, Steve Hodel, claimed that his father killed Lucila Lalu. His father was George Hodel, the suspected murderer of Elizabeth Short, who was found in almost exact same conditions as Lucila Lalu. During his investigation, Steve Hodel found that his father was living in Manila in the 60s, leading him to believe that George was also behind Lucila's murder. However, there were some inaccuracies in his book. He claimed that Lucila's torso was found along Zodiac Street in Makati. However, news reports stated that it was found along EDSA near Guadalupe. Some people do believe that George killed Lucila, but since there is no evidence to support this theory, the case officially remains unsolved. The Chong Sisters. On the evening of July 16, 1997, sisters Mary Joy and Jacqueline Chong were last seen waiting for their ride home in Cebu's Ayala Center under a waiting shed. 2 days later, Mary Joy's body was found in a ravine in Karkar, Cebu, while Jacqueline was nowhere to be found. When Mary Joy was found, she had a handcuff on her left wrist. Her pants were torn, her orange-hued shirt was rolled up, her bra was pulled down, and her breasts were exposed. She also had a masking tape wrapped around her face and neck. An autopsy was conducted on her, and it was found that Mary Joy was gang raped before she was thrown over the cliff. She was found to have died of brain hemorrhage and physical injuries that included multiple fractures in the skull, left clavicle and ribs, a dislocated right knee, lacerated wounds on the forehead and hand, contusions on the forehead and abdomen, and abrasions in various parts of the body. An extensive search was carried out, but Jacqueline was never found. Despite number of searches and interviews, police were also unable to find any clue as to who was behind the kidnapping and murder of the Chong sisters for first few months. The hunt for the suspects led the police investigators to prominent families in Cebu. On May 1998, Francisco Juan Paco Larrañaga, a man of dual Filipino and Spanish citizenship, along with 7 others, were arrested in connection with the case. Along with Paco, the accused included Josman Aznar, James Andrew, James Anthony Uwe, Albert Balansag, Ariel Cano, Rowan Adelawan, and David Rusia. In late May, all 7 men went on a trial. David Rusia, one of the accused, turned into a state witness in exchange for blanket immunity, and he admitted in court that they gang raped and murdered the sisters. Rusia said that the sisters were taken in a rented van to a house in Guadalupe, Cebu City, where they were raped in separate rooms by Aznar, Adelawan, Paco, and James Anthony Uwe. He said Belanasag and Cano then drove the van to Caracar town, where Mary Jo, her head wrapped in masking tape, was pushed off the cliff. He said Jacqueline was taken back to the city early the next day. David never relayed what happened to Jacqueline, nor was he asked by the prosecution. However, all of the other accused denied the charges. Paco presented witnesses and evidence, including photographs, to prove he was in Quezon City at the time of the crimes. 35 witnesses, including Paco's teachers and classmates at the Center of Culinary Arts, testified under oath that he was in Quezon City when the crime is said to have taken place in Cebu. However, the trial court considered these testimonies irrelevant, rejecting these as coming from friends of the accused, and they were not admitted. His friends additionally swore that they were with him that night, as they hung out in a bar in Katipunan. They even took photographs together. These photographs were shown as evidence. The prosecutor later on rejected these photos, proposing that the photographs were edited, because in one photo, Paco wasn't glancing at the camera and that he was sitting in a seat that had a distinctive color. The logbook from his condominium records him arriving home at 2:45 a.m., which the security guard on duty validated. Rowena Bautista, an instructor and chef at the culinary center, said Paco was in school from 8 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. and saw him again at about 6:30 p.m. on July 16th. The school's registrar said she proctored a 2-hour exam where Paco was present from 1:30 p.m. Paco even attended his second round of midterm exams on July 17th, commencing at 8 a.m. Only then did Paco leave for Cebu in the late afternoon of July 17th, 1997. Airline and airport personnel also came to court with their flight records, indicating that Paco did not take any flights on July 16, 1997, nor was he on board any chartered aircraft that landed in or departed from Cebu during the relevant dates, except the 5 p.m. PAL flight on July 17, 1997 from Manila to Cebu. Additionally, Paco claimed that he only knew Josman and Rowan. Mary Joy's family claimed that Paco was one of Mary Joy's suitors, even though Paco denied knowing any of the sisters. Nevertheless, the Supreme Court upheld the conviction of the accused without reasonable doubt. The 7 co-defendants were convicted of murder and sentenced to death by lethal injection on February 3, 2004. Luckily, on June 24, 2006, capital punishment was abolished in Philippines. It was very recently reported that Donicio Chong, Mary Joy and Jacqueline's father, was a trusted cohort of someone who was under congressional investigation for drug trafficking. Donicio managed the alleged drug lord's trucking business. Donicio was fired, and he was set to testify against his former boss in front of Congressional Committee on Dangerous Drugs. That's when his daughters went missing, and he decided not to testify. Years later, Paco's friends continue to proclaim his innocence and believe that Paco and the 6 accused were wrongly framed by the police. Since Paco had dual citizenship, in November 2009, the Department of Justice approved Paco's transfer to a Spanish prison to serve remaining of his sentence, while the others accused are still behind bars in Philippines to this day. Ninablanca. Dorothy Aqueza Jones, popularly known by her stage name Ninablanca, was a Filipina actress. She starred in over 163 movies and 14 television shows and received over 16 awards for movies and 6 awards for television during her 50-year film career. She was named one of the 15 best actresses of all time by the Yes magazine. She was once married to Victorino Torres and gave birth to her daughter Kay. When Kay was 2 years old, Nida separated from her husband. While filming John Derek's Once Before I Die in the Philippines, Nida met singer and actor Rod Strunk, and they got married in the United States in 1979. On November 7, 2001, at around 8 a.m., a security guard found Blanca's body beaten and stabbed 13 times in the back seat of her Nissan Sentra in the parking lot of Atlanta Center in Green Hills, San Juan, Metro Manila, where she worked for the MTRCB. She worked as a board member, attending screenings and rating movies and television shows twice a week for Movie and Television Review and Classification Board. An autopsy placed her time of death between 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. of November 7, 2001. A single-bladed weapon measuring at least 5.5 centimeters was used to kill her. There were no signs of defense wounds associated with her struggle, and there were no signs of struggle inside her vehicle too. However, there were a trail of blood leading to the car, which suggested that she was killed somewhere else and her body was dragged to her Nissan Sentra. During the investigation, it was found that Nida and Rod's marriage wasn't working out. According to the household staff, they slept in separate rooms, and sometime during the 90s, Rod was even caught using drugs, but Nida had forgiven him. Rod's finances were also out of control, and Nida had complained about it to Kay, her daughter from the previous marriage. Blanca eventually disinherited Rod from her will. Investigators found that Blanca had 85 million pesos in properties, including a Green Hills San Juan condominium worth 10 million pesos and a house in California worth $300,000. If Blanca had annulled her marriage, Rod would get nothing. But if Blanca died before she was able to terminate her marriage, Rod would be entitled to a portion of her assets as a legal spouse under the law, even though Blanca's will stated that all her properties would go to her daughter. In a turn of events, on 18th November 2001, a man named Pedro Philip Medel Jr. surrendered to the police and confessed that he killed Ninablanca. Medel said that a man named Mike Martinez had called him in early October 2001 to participate in a project they called Tantoco Project. The project involved intimidating a swindling wife of a Chinese. On 6th November 2001, Martinez called Medel and they agreed to meet. While waiting for Martinez at around 5 p.m., a Caucasian man came and asked if he was Medel. Medel confirmed, and when he asked about Martinez, the Caucasian said that they would meet him someplace else. However, Martinez never showed up, and Medel and the Caucasian, whom he referred to as Rad, ended up going to the 6th floor of the Atlanta Center and waited until 12 midnight. Rad told Medel that he was leaving and asked Medel to wait in the nearby parked dark green car, which was Nida's Nissan. Rad unlocked the car and let Medel in. Medel spent his time texting some friends and fell asleep. He woke up around 1 a.m. by the lights coming from a car that parked at the adjacent space. Medel saw Rad and two other women get out of the car. Rad pushed the woman wearing a striped blouse and dark-colored pants into the back seat. Rad and the other woman then kicked and struck her. Medel joined in, hitting the woman and stabbing her with his knife. Medel, Rad and the other woman left the parking lot at around 2 a.m. Medel said that he went home and hid his knife under his kitchen sink. Later, Medel was shocked to learn that the victim was the famous Ninablanca. With this confession, the public realized that Medel was referring to Rod Strunk and Ding Tontoco, who was a friend of Ninablanca. Rod Strunk immediately denied the allegations. Ding also denied her involvement and announced that she passed the lie detector test. Then, 4 days later, on 23rd November 2001, Medel recanted his testimony, claiming the police had tortured him into confessing. Despite Medel's recantation, Rod remained the prime suspect according to the Philippines prosecutors, based largely on circumstantial evidence and statements by the new witnesses. Rod was in the US in 2003 when he was charged with the murder of Ninablanca. He had left Philippines in January 2002 to visit his mother, who was dying at the time, and never returned. He was later arrested at his home and detained at the Sacramento County Jail after the Philippine government filed an extradition request against Strunk to stand trial in Philippines. However, due to the submitted evidence, the US court on 12 November 2003 denied the petition and ordered Rod to be freed from the Sacramento County Jail. On July 11, 2007, Rod committed suicide by jumping from a second-floor balcony of the Tracy Inn in Tracy, California, where he had been staying for 3 days. Philip Medel remained the suspect and was held in jail until his death on 7 April 2010 at the age of 62. Medel died of sepsis caused by pneumonia at the Philippine General Hospital. It's been 17 years and the case officially remains unsolved. Visconti Massacre. On June 30th, 1991, Estrelita Visconti and her daughters Carmela and Jennifer were brutally slain at their residence in BF Homes, Paranaque. Combined, the three bore 49 stab wounds. Estrelita, 49 years old, had suffered 13 stab wounds. Carmela, 19 years old, had suffered 17 stab wounds and had been raped before she was killed, and Jennifer, who was only 7 years old, had 19 stab wounds. Lauro Visconti, Estrellita's husband and the father of Carmela and Jennifer, was in the United States on business when the murders took place. Following the investigation, police took fingerprints and photographs of the crime scene, and afterwards asked the relatives to clean up the house, resulting in destroying the vital pieces of evidence. Back in 1991, DNA testing was not available in Philippines, so DNA evidence was not collected from the crime scene, and it will be another decade before DNA was accepted as a proper piece of evidence in court. Investigation into the Visconti murders went nowhere for 3 months, until the police arrested a group of suspects, some of whom gave detailed confessions. But in the next few weeks, the suspects retracted their confessions and claimed that they were forced into making false confessions. The trial court smelled the frame up and eventually ordered them discharged. The case remained unsolved for almost 4 years, until an eyewitness, Jessica Alfaro, a self-confessed former drug addict, came forward in April 28, 1995 to shed light on the killings of the Viscontis. Alfaro implicated the children of wealthy and prominent families, including Hubert Webb, Antonio Lejano II, Hospicio Fernandez, Michael Gachalian, Miguel Rodriguez, Peter Estrada, Joey Filet, and Artemio Ventura. Out of the 8 suspects, 6 were arrested, while Joey Filet and Artemio Ventura were never arrested and remained at large. Alfaro also tagged police officer Gerardo Biong, who was the first policeman to arrive at the crime scene, as an accessory to the murders. In a trial that began in 1995, Alfaro testified that she knew the suspects and was at the Visconti house when the crime was committed. She said that after a drug session with the group, Hubert Webb allegedly devised a plan to rape Carmela Visconti. Webb wanted Alfaro, the then girlfriend of one of the accused men, Peter Estrada, to join them because Estrellita Visconti only allowed her daughter to go out and entertain female visitors. Alfaro said that as Webb followed Carmela into the dining room, she decided to step outside for a smoke. From there, she allegedly saw Lejano and Ventura take a knife from the kitchen drawer, while the rest of the gang acted as lookouts. Alfaro said Estrellita was killed before Webb began to rape Carmela. Jennifer woke up and, seeing Webb violating her sister, jumped on him and bit him. He then hurled the little girl to the wall and started stabbing her. When Alfaro went back to the house, she saw bodies of Estrellita and Jennifer on the bed, and Webb raping Carmela on the floor. Lejano and Ventura also took turns raping Carmela, before finishing her off with numerous stabs. She also pointed out that policeman Gerardo Biong was instructed by Webb to take care of the house where the incident happened. For their part, the accused testified, denying any part in the crime and saying they were elsewhere when it took place. All of the accused except Peter Estrada even denied knowing Alfaro. Webb's alibi appeared to be the strongest, since he claimed that he was in the United States of America when the murders took place. However, the Webb family maids Mila Gaviola and Nerissa Rosales both testified that Hubert was at home on June 30th, 1991. Mila Gaviola claimed that she even washed Hubert's blood-stained t-shirt on the murder night. But Webb's lawyers presented evidence that included affidavits from the US Immigration Service as well as photographs and receipts that bolstered Webb's assertion that he was not in the country at the time of the murders. They also presented 95 witnesses, including Hubert Webb himself and his father, along with other relatives and friends, to support Webb's alibi that he was in the United States from March 9, 1991 to October 26, 1992. Out of 142 pieces of evidence the defense presented, the judge Amelita Tolentino only admitted 10. Among the evidence that was not admitted by the judge was the note verbal from the United States Embassy in Manila claiming that Webb entered the United States in March 1991 and only left in October 1992. This coincided with his passport and Philippine immigration records, but were dismissed by Tolentino due to the belief that these documents can easily be falsified. Moreover, Judge Tolentino denied Webb's request to have the semen stains obtained from the victim's autopsy tested for DNA, which may have established Webb as the murderer or not, claiming that the DNA evidence could have been tampered with. At the same time, while Alfaro, the key witness, positively identified Webb as the main suspect, her credibility as a witness had been in doubt due to the fact that she was a former drug user and was likely on drugs when she witnessed the crime. Despite this, Judge Tolentino gave more credence to Alfaro's testimony and used it as a basis for her decision. On 6th January 2000, Judge Amelita Tolentino declared Hubert Webb and his co-accused Michael Gachilian, Hospicio Fernandez, Peter Estrada, Antonio Lejano, and Miguel Rodriguez guilty and sentenced to life in prison. They were also ordered to pay Visconti family 3 million pesos in damages. Byong was also found guilty of tampering with evidence and sentenced to 15 years. Byong was released from jail on November 30, 2010 after serving his sentence. On December 2005, on motion for reconsideration by the accused, the Court of Appeals Special Division of 5 members voted 3 against 2 to uphold the decision of Parañaque City Court convicting Webb and the others accused of the massacre. In April 2010, the Supreme Court approved DNA testing to be performed on the semen specimen obtained during autopsy from Carmela Visconti. 3 days later, the NBI admitted it does not have the semen taken from the body of Carmela, but that it was turned over to the Parañaque City Court in 1996. Earlier, the Parañaque Court's staff reported to the Supreme Court that the specimen is not in their custody and that it was lost. This outcome prompted accused Webb to file an urgent motion to acquit on the ground that the government's failure to preserve such a vital piece of evidence has resulted in the denial of his right to prove his innocence. On December 14, 2010, the Supreme Court ruled that the prosecution had failed to prove the charges beyond reasonable doubt, and Webb and the others accused were released from prison. Laura Visconti died on February 13, 2016, without knowing the fate of his wife and daughters. It's been 27 years since the Visconti Massacre, but the case still remains open and unsolved.